And welcome back to the Firearms Nation podcast. And tonight I am joined by Les Kismartoni, who is a distinguished master in IDPA. And for all those who have emailed me over the years and messaged me over the years to get somebody who's on IDPA on the show, like I never gave any love to IDPA, which is not true, because if you actually look in the back catalog, I have interviewed Bob Vogel a couple of times, and Bob Vogel is pretty good at IDPA, and also Mike Seeklander and Shannon Smith. They all done IDPA, but I guess they're not known for IDPA specifically. So I'm bringing on Les tonight because I guess in the IDPA circle glitterati, he is in there. And so people were very excited to hear that he was coming on. But I'm also bringing on Les because he is a grandmaster shooter in USPSA, but he's friends with Graybeard Actual, Matthew Little, who was on the show last week, who highly recommended, I don't know why, but he highly recommended Les on the show. And you can hear Les breathing in the background. So I'll get him in soon enough. But I just want to say, first of all, thank you for coming to watch this live stream and know that this is also a podcast. It is a video podcast on YouTube. If you want to catch it, it's Firearms Nation on YouTube. But also you can go on any podcast application on Apple, on Spotify, on Podcast Addict, on Google, all of them, if you want to listen to it. And it's a little bit different it's a little more edited than the live stream, but I enjoy it, and I'm going to stop talking because I want to bring on Les. So Les, thank you so much. I hope I didn't butcher your name.
No, pepperoni. No, it's 100% fake Italian, right? So, no, my last name's Kismartoni, and you did a fine job at it. So,
good.
Yeah,
and listen,
go ahead.
Before we get started, I just wanted to do
this. No, man. Oh, dude. No.
And look at that. For those of you that can't see, I just put some ketchup on my hot dog. Let me take a bite.
Dude.
Oh,
man.
It is so good.
Did Tino put you up to that? Ken Yang and T, like, come on. Oh, man. No, it's fine. Kids have ketchup on hot dogs in Chicago, and obviously you're a kid. So, it's we'll give you a free pass. But hey, as far as Chicago roots go, you actually have some Chicago roots. So
yes, we can talk about that.
When your relatives see that, they're going to be right pissed at you. So, but
all right, let's get this out of the way. So, Chicago hot dogs. Which one do you like the best? Portillo's?
Portillo's, man, you've been in Miami way too long. It's Portillo's, but
Portillo's.
Portillo's. Yeah, it's Portillo's, right? Portillo's is really good. There's a couple good places. Gene and Jude's on I'm blanking on the Riverwoods. They're really good. They've got a good hot dog. There's a couple places in Des Plaines, kind of off the beaten path. So Portillo's is the biggest chain, and it's kind of funny. I work up at WAFT, which is West Orlando Firearms Training, or where our families train, and it's a pretty cool place. So it's like when I'm coming home from it's actually up in Clermont. So when I'm coming back from Clermont, then I'll actually stop in at the Portillo's in Brandon, and I usually smash a hot dog and some fries or something. And chocolate cake shake is a little bit too much, and the chocolate cake is good, but yeah, it's a good standby, and it's kind of tough to find all the right ingredients unless you're going to order everything off of Amazon and then assemble at home, right? But so it's but yeah, Portillo's is a good go-to dog, especially if you're not in Chicago. And honestly, since moving down here, I haven't been back. Actually, I went back once. No, correction, twice I went back. I went once to visit Matt. He was nice enough to let me crash at his house. And then another time I went up to bring back some equipment for my wife, who's a veterinarian. And both times it's like, oh, I got to get my hot dog and my beef and everything in, and then it's because I know I'm not going to have it for a while when I come back down to Florida. So, but yeah,
Yeah, they don't
this
do
is
hot
this.
dogs well in Florida.
No, not really. They put ketchup on them, right? So, but yeah, that them in Texas, right? But yeah, the Portillo's down here does a good job, and it's funny. It's like growing up in Chicago. It's things like that you miss, right? You don't miss the taxes or the the politics of the city, or the crippling depression in winter and all that stuff. You kind of miss, like, oh, the food was good, or hey, the baklava in Greektown was fire, and I really miss that. But oh well, So what are you gonna do? But yeah, anyway, yeah, the hot dog thing, it's become kind of a bit, and between T and a couple other people, and it's just it's kind of always fun to rehash that. And you have people like the vulgar chef on Instagram who do like totally horrible things with hot dogs, and put them into strawberries and then leave them out as like fruit snacks or something. And it's like that you get a laugh out of it, but yeah. um yeah.
So, all right. So we got the hot dogs. I agree with you on Portillo's. It's too much Miami. You're right. Uh, Pizza. What is your pizza? I talked to Matt about that last week. What's your take on your favorite pizza in Chicago?
Yeah, man, I mean, a lot of the smaller little like tavern places, actually, it's kind of funny. I was thinking of, it's a little weird. I had posted a very old USPSA rule book. There's the '08 copy, and I found it in a whole bunch of old documents from when I used to run McHenry IPSC, which is now up at Alpha Range. And we used to shoot in this little tiny cement basement. And after shooting, we'd always shoot on a Wednesday night. We'd kick over. There was a place called the Foxhole, and Foxhole had like the typical Chicago tavern pizza, which is always cut into squares because you had a whole bunch of people. You just bring out like a 24-inch pie, and it's all cut into squares, and everybody gets a little piece, and order a couple pitchers of beer, and it was enough to feed a small army. So there's places like that I kind of, they're totally off the beaten path. It's like a total neighborhood thing. Whereas if you didn't know it, it's not like one of the big pizza places. Like, you get people into Chicago and you take them to like Geno's, or you take them to Lil Malnati's or something like that. And that's kind of the good standby. But I don't know. Deep dish is okay. I like Pequod's deep dish once in a while. I had a coworker who was super into making his own deep dish, and he could do a really good job. So I like that. But honestly, favorite pizza is really like a good Neapolitan style or a good New York style pie. And Sarasota, interesting. We have a whole bunch of Italians, and man, there's some really good pizza places down here in Sarasota where they actually have a wood-fired oven, and they, do the whole thing from scratch, dough, sauce, everything, and imported ingredients. And man, I like to eat. We could talk about food all night. But yeah, so some of the Neapolitan places around here that's actually my favorite, just because it's so fresh. And I mean, if you order like a Lou Malnati's and you have it mailed to you or something like that, which you can do, it's like a frozen pie, and it's okay, but it's like, just order a fresh pizza from a place that you like down the street. It's going to be better. And
Well,
if you're in Chicago, okay, but if you're not, forget it. Yeah.
well, it's funny. We went to. I took Junior to Chicago,
Hmm.
2019. Was it 2019? It was like 2018, December 2018.
Sure.
Uh, and because he'd never seen, he grew up here, he's never seen snow. So I was keeping my fingers crossed. We went in December, and sure enough, we got an awesome blizzard. It was great. We stayed in like the Streeterville area, close
Oh,
to Water
yeah.
Tower. Uh, right next door to the hotel was Lou Malnati's. So of course we went. We actually went there twice, I think, in 3 days.
Nice.
It was so
Get-
good. But yeah, that was the whole. He got the whirlwind tour of all the good places to eat. The only thing he didn't get a chance to go to eat was in Greektown.
sure.
That would have been good, but it was, he went to the Willis Tower and went to the Hancock.
Sears Tower, the
I
Sears
grew up at
Tower.
the
No,
Sears
no,
Tower.
yeah,
I said, can I go to the Sears Tower? And people were looking at me strange. And they go, you mean the Willis Tower? I'm like, who the hell's Willis? But
yeah.
I've been
What you
away
talking
for
about with
too
this,
long.
right? Yeah,
Which time? Well, I have no idea what that is.
yeah,
Uh, but it's been fun. It was great. It's terrible to see how the city has changed. Um, we'll see what happens tonight. I mean,
yeah. The
if I,
mayoral election.
yeah, the mayoral
It's
election is going on right now, and hopefully they get a change. I know that Lori Lightfoot was trending on uh, Twitter, and we'll see what happens. I don't know. So, uh, holy cow, Paul Vallis is leading. And for those of you that don't
wow.
know who Paul Vallis is, he was definitely the one who was the law and order type candidate of all. He got the supporting of the police union. If that happens, because he's just leading now and it's early in the results, fingers are crossed because they need that, obviously law enforcement background. I think that's what we need, but the city is not safe as it was. You see all the stuff that's going on. And I know from doing research on you, Les, that's part of the reason why you got into shooting. So tell us again, why did you get into
Sure.
shooting? What happened?
Yeah, enough about food in Chicago and everything. But so it's, uh, my parents were immigrants, so we're actually not Italian. We're Hungarian, and the name sounds Italian, which is hence all the Italian jokes and everything. But I was born in Chicago and raised in Chicago in the outskirts of. Um, we lived in Humboldt Park, which was a predominantly Puerto Rican neighborhood at the time. It was gentrifying a little bit. It was an old German slash Polish neighborhood that had basically undergone like the politics of Chicago are fascinating. The movement of people through the city is amazing. A lot of the Germans and the Polish left for the suburbs. A lot of black folk and a lot of Puerto Ricans moved in, and it became a predominantly Puerto Rican neighborhood. They have the big flags up and a lot of Puerto Rican food and everything, Puerto Rican restaurants, neighborhood establishments. And it's kind of odd though. A lot of the Puerto Ricans in the neighborhood have also moved out. They've moved to the back of the yards and a couple other places, further west, further northwest out of the city, out of Humboldt Park at least. And a lot of it has re-gentrified now, which is it brings its own big mess of problems. But for a long time, Division and Rockwell was actually a pretty rough neighborhood, and we lived right there. We lived at Crystal and Rockwell, just off of the corner there. A friend of mine had bought a Greystone, and we helped him renovate, and it was a pretty rough neighborhood. Um, I had a friend of mine who had just come back from Iraq, and he started working at a gun store in Des Plaines, and he was brokering some private sales, etc. And I bought my first gun, which is a revolver, and 686 that a friend of mine still has, and I just kind of bought it for home defense, just because it was a pretty rough area at the time. So I my friend who owned the building, his dad was a cop and he had gone shooting, so he took me out shooting a few times and went through and just learned how to shoot, learned how to appreciate just lining up the sights and hitting the target, and it's just something I really enjoyed doing. Um, Fast forward about a year, I've had the gun. It was just kind of in the nightstand all the time, and I ended up taking a class with Masayub and everything. And in the city, you never really had too much trouble, just because you kind of grow up and you know what's good and what's bad, where you should and shouldn't be, and you start to appreciate a sense of maybe danger or fear when you're out of your element, and you kind of you have to listen to that a little bit if you grow up in a city, or in Chicago at least. And so we really stayed out of trouble. We stayed in our little neighborhood, um, which was getting better. We got to know some of the locals and our neighbors, and we still keep in touch today. And it's been, I don't know, the entire neighborhood has changed a lot. I'm not going to say it's changed for the better. Maybe in the immediate vicinity, some of the kind of street crime and petty crime has gone down, but it brings that whole weird isolation bit to it too, where people are just boxed in. They don't really know their neighbors, and they don't want to get to know their neighbors, and people are just kind of cut off, which is also a bit sad. Um, that is one thing I really liked about Chicago, is it was a big melting pot, and but anyway, that's basically how I got into guns. I never really shot before that. Um, since my parents were, as I said, immigrants, they had a pretty dim view of firearms in general. So the police had them, the military had them, criminals had them, and normal people didn't have access to them. Normal people didn't entertain the idea of owning them. And even though they had been living in the States for quite a while at that point, they never exercised their Second Amendment right. And I don't think it was until maybe about 10 years ago that my dad first bought his first handgun, which is a 22, a Ruger. And it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And I think a lot of people in America, just kind of extending that, I think if they're not in a position where they have to consider personal protection, or if they're not in a position where they're growing up in a family where there's some enthusiasm for it, hunting or just marksmanship or something like that, or just the technical details of firearms, then a lot of people just never really know about it. It's never really explored for them. So, but yeah, that's my background in getting into it, and just kind of stumbled my way into shooting, if you will.
So for you at that time, was it Latin Kings? Were the gang that you had to watch out for?
So Latin Kings are actually a little bit further south. The neighborhood wasn't so bad. I mean, we were the crazy white people who lived in a neighborhood, right? Is essentially what it was. Um, so it's weird. I don't know if it's the Insane Disciples or something like that. It was like the area going north from Division along Rockwell, going north and west out of the city. And then I think it was south of Division was, I think, where Latin Kings were, but we never really saw too much of that. We did see some real violence. Like we'd walk down Division Street, actually, past Western Avenue. So once you cross Western and you got into what was essentially the very south end of Wicker Park, then
Mm-hmm.
you had a couple places there, like Leticia's Bakery, Black Cat Cafe. They had a really good sushi place there that I can't remember the name of. It's 20 years ago at this point, but or more. But Leticia's was a really good, like, organic bakery and coffee house, and we would walk there. We'd walk the 2 blocks, kind of past Clementi High School, and then past um, uh, past Western Ave and everything along Division. But walking back at some points, we'd hear gunshots, or there was one night where somebody was actually killed as we were actually walking back. We were actually walking back with my friend who was the veteran, and he's like, "Those are gunshots. Let's go back to Leticia." So we kind of hung out there for a little bit, and then we saw the police cars speeding, and then we figured, okay, now maybe it's good time to walk home and whatever. And yeah, they had the sheet over the body and everything. It was like, oh man, that's just, it's a shame. But it's weird. It's weird living in a place like that, because if you're how should I say, if you're entrenched in the neighborhood in a way where you have turf, and because you're running dope or guns or something like that, then you are part of, like, the entire gang establishment and gang problem. But we're just people who were there, who were renovating a house, we'd work in downtown and then come back. We're the yuppies, right? Per se. Then, since we're not buying dope or buying guns or doing anything like that, then we were an afterthought. Maybe somebody steals, like, a couple of mountain bikes out of your garage, or tries to, like, hotwire your car or something like that, or whatever. But it's not us that are being shot at, because we're like, who are we? We're nobody. So we're the crazy white people who have a whole bunch of dogs that are in the neighborhood. And maybe it helped that we had a whole pack of Dobermans living at the house with us at that time. So um, maybe, but that hand cannon maybe helped a little bit too. In the back of my mind, that I wasn't going to take any shit from anybody. But At least they were in my house is the way I viewed it. But um, but a more nuanced approach, didn't come until fairly later. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a weird experience, in a rough neighborhood. I mean, again, if you're, I don't know. I look at that point in my life as a kind of transitional because it wasn't where we were going to stay for the long run. We were there as we went to school or got our first jobs in the city, and then we were going to move somewhere else or we're going to look for something else. But it wasn't the place that we were going to, plant the flag and make our stand there and say this is our home. We always knew that, hey, this garden apartment on 2016 Crystal is going to be, like where we're at for now, and then we're going to be gone in a few years. So my buddy ended up selling the house. He now lives in Prescott. He actually lives just north of Prescott, Arizona, in Chino, which is kind of funny. So if you run across the desert to the north, and you're in Pauldine, and then it's like, oh wow. Then you run back towards Prescott, and then you hit like all the other Prescott weirdos and everything like that for all the firearms training, the Auerbucks and the Suarezes and everything. And that was kind of an interesting thing when he moved out. So I was like, oh wow, he moved from the most anti-gun place to probably one of the most permissive places at the time, which is really, really interesting. And that was about like 2008 as I started getting really into USPSA. So interesting thing, right? Like cultures are different. But
How did you get into competition in the first place in the city? Because living in the city, there's not a whole lot of ranges. It's not like you go further into the
yeah,
suburbs, the western suburbs, you might get into more ranges, but in the city, there's not.
yeah, none. Yeah, I think uh, there's of course, like if you're a law enforcement guy, right, in Chicago, then you have your access to a number of different ranges and a number of the different precincts and everything. And Matt could certainly tell you all about that. But for us, whenever we want to go shoot, we'd actually have to drive out to Des Plaines. There was a range in Des Plaines, or we'd have to drive out further. We'd have to drive over to East Dundee, where there was another bigger shop that actually had a range. Um, and we found out that you could actually uh, just keep driving, and you hit Rockford. There was a place that was essentially open 24/7. You could key in, turn on fans, and then shoot there. So it's the old Pine Tree Pistol Club, which has been around since the 50s. And that place was pretty cool. They had a really good USPSA and uh, like just a really good competitive shooting scene in general. They shot PPC there, Bullseye, USPSA, IDPA. They had a whole bunch of basic pistol instruction. So that was a really good place to go. Um, I'm trying to think of, a little bit further in southern Wisconsin, and like, I want to say Elkhart. We had a couple places that were pretty good ranges up there, but that was, there weren't many. In the past, it's weird. In the past 20 years, in the past 10 years, there've been a lot more ranges that have actually come up in the Chicago area, which is really cool. Alpha Range, on Target up in Crystal Lake, uh, Range 55, which is along 355 somewhere. Um, a couple other places that have grown as well. So, place in Des Plaines Maxons that I think they've gotten bigger, and so that's cool. It's good to see, especially in a place that's so, downtown Chicago is so anti-gun. I don't think they're ever going to get a range in the city limits, but just outside of the city limits, people have options. So if you're a gun owner in Chicago, you have places to go. So which is really cool. That's cool to see.
What brought you to competition in the first place?
Yeah, it was kind of a mistake. I said I had that revolver, and I would go to the range. I would go to the range on generally on a Thursday night, and I'd go shoot. And then I showed up on the wrong night. I showed up on a Wednesday night, and they were having a USPSA competition, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And um, I was kind of just floored. I ended up staying and watching the whole thing. There was an old guy. His name was Jerry Gardner, and he passed away in 2019. Actually, I have a picture on the wall here, and he's the guy that got me into shooting the Florida Open, which is one of the reasons why I continue to go to the Florida Open, even though this year was kind of a far cry from what the Florida Open used to be. We could hash that out later, but But Jerry Gardner was the guy that got me into competition. He said, "Hey, you should come. You got this thing. You're trying to train for some self defense and everything like that. Why don't you come back, next Wednesday and get a holster, and we'll run you through this. You'll need about 50 rounds of ammunition, and then we'll make it work." And back then, I think there were like 12 people shooting competition. It was a bunch of old dudes. And I thought, oh, okay, USPSA is just something that the old guys are talking about because they want to get out of the house and have pizza or something like that. Over at the Foxhole, we were talking about that. They want to get out of the house and have pizza and drink some beers and just their bowling league. But yeah, they call it USPSA, whatever. Man, I didn't realize it was actually like an organized sport until much later. I think when I shot the Florida Open in '07 or something like that, I came down and I was just like, holy crap. Like there's people who are really good. This is like an international thing. And there's like, wow, what do I need to do? How do I need to train to get better at this? And that's when you start trying to figure out, okay, what do I need? I need gear. Okay, I need gear, and now I need some training. Now I need a place to go practice, and you kind of start to build up that like hierarchy of the needs and the wants, and figure out what you can do and what you can essentially do within your budget, and go from there. So it's a little weird though, starting off back then, just because it's like information is so much more available now for the person who's shooting. You've got Firearms Nation podcast. You've got Matt's book. You've got Instagram. There's a billion people, and Donovan's and Scott Jedlinski's that are touring the nation, teaching people how to pop and whatever. You've got you just have so much more information available on things like Reddit, YouTube, Twitter. I mean, you name it. If you're looking for firearms content, you can find it. And a lot of it's very good. And back then, it was not very available. I mean, YouTube launched in 2005, and I think I didn't think of looking for like firearms content until maybe like '07 or whatever, right? Like it's just it's much easier to be a shooter these days, I think, than it was, going back almost 20 years or so. So, yeah. But yeah, that's how I got into it. Yeah.
The video that Todd Jarrett put up, and one day I'm going to have him on so I can talk about it. That changed it for me. It was him showing a bunch of people.
Oh, when he's telling people how to shoot.
Yeah, how to shoot his grip in the 1911 and the thumbs forward and all that. And I think I was maybe 2 or 3 years on the job at the point, and yeah, no, we weren't Beverly Hills Copping it, but or Cagney and Lacey it, but it still it was a crappy grip. I mean, back then, for those of you who can't see what Les is doing, he's doing his best Cagney and Lacey moves, and most people actually don't know what that is. It was a TV show from the '80s with these two women cops,
like Barney Miller. Just say it's like Barney.
It's Barney Miller. Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning that. Great TV show, guys. Go out there and see it. You'll enjoy it compared to the crap that's out there today. I mean, there's so much crap out there. But yeah, so that YouTube was very, very, it was hard to come by finding that stuff. And we didn't have phones like we have now that had YouTube. I think I got that video from a computer and I was able to download it to my phone so I could watch it. It was different, but we're not going to regress too far. But going back to that, you had a revolver, but you didn't say you weren't shooting competition with a revolver, were you?
I was, yeah. For the first few years, I actually shot competition with a revolver. I ended up buying a Glock. It was kind of a joke. I bought a Glock 40 because 9mm was kind of too confusing. I'm an idiot. I'm sorry, but yeah, between 124 and 147 and plus P and plus P plus, and should I buy NATO ammo or 115 grain, or is Winchester white box good enough? And just like 40 had 165 grain and 180 grain. It looked about the same as a 9mm. Just I was shooting 10 rounds in production anyway, So it's like, oh, whatever. Like I'll do that. Um,
Wait, how are you
so
shooting
yeah,
production with a 40?
yeah, you could shoot 40. You just scored minor. You just load 10 rounds in
Oh,
the magazine. That's it. Yeah. So did that for a long time, and it was
I've
okay. I didn't
never
mind it.
heard anybody doing that. I'm sure it can be done, but I've never heard of anybody doing that.
Yeah, Matt Olenchak, who's a buddy of
Sure.
mine who actually moved from Pennsylvania. He lives here just outside of Sarasota. I'm in sunny Sarasota. Well, it's not sunny now because it's night, um, but yeah, he lives a little bit further inland, so he lives in Lakewood Ranch. But he shot production with a 40 cal because I think his Tanfolio he could only find the stock two in 40 cal. This is back when everybody's snatching up the
Yep.
9 millimeter guns
Yep.
when Ben had moved over. He gave up the Beretta and went right to the Tanfo. But yeah, he shot 40 cal in production for a long time, and that was his jam too. And he did. I mean, he's a GM and GM Unlimited and GM and Cherry Optics, so he's pretty good. So I mean, if you download 40, whatever, it's not a big deal. So you can buy little like 130 grain pills for it and just make powder puff loads, and it'll push like 130 power factor real easy and still accurate and everything too, at least for what we do. So, but yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it was. I after shooting revolver and just kind of being done with it, I decided to buy the Glocks and kind of go into production from there, and that was fun. It was a good time. So yeah.
How did you get
So
better?
how did I get better? Yeah, that's you know so there was a guy in Chicago. His name is John Krupa, and uh, I give him a lot of credit for a couple things. He had a very good curriculum. He was a Chicago cop at the time. He had a really good curriculum for uh, essentially for policemen, really. And but a lot of that curriculum was also really the modern technique: thumbs forward grip, natural action stance. He had just a fantastic presentation with the whole thing too, which is excellent. And I think that a lot of what he presented in his classes really, like, it was really a big catalyst, a really big food for thought. And that's what I took home. And then I started to dry fire from there. And since he was using like the pro timers, right, to do the signals, and we could actually see how that thing worked, a little CED competition timers, it was actually the blue pocket pro timers, excuse me. It was really cool to see how that all worked. And okay, I go to a class with him, I pick his brain. It's like, okay, so you're saying that I should be able to do a draw in 1.5 seconds and then make that work and be able to get like a solid hit on a target. Yes, you should do that. And you should practice it this way. And it was a lot of that discussion, um, kind of like, trying to like find out par times that were reasonable or anything like that going into it. That's when Anderson's book also came out, and was like, okay, this is really cool. And that dry fire was a big catalyst for a lot of growth from there. So there's, still a lot of stuff to try and put together and integrate from there, but it was like that was a really big deal. Like, so his classes were a big catalyst to keep searching and to learn the template. And then I'd say that it was like Anderson's book was really good too. I think there's a dog at my door. Hang on one second. I'm sorry to move my thing. All right, there
Well,
we
it's
go.
okay. It's only a live
Live
stream
stream
over the internet with millions of people watching.
with
So
tens
no
of
one's
people.
going to notice that. No one is going to notice that.
Right.
Uh,
It's annoying me more than them. Right.
is that
Yeah.
was that what the clicking noise
Yeah, it
was?
was the clicking. I was like, is she clicking? I've got like the noise canceling thing like turned down, and I was just like, oh, wait a minute, there's something going on. But
I thought maybe
but
you were
uh,
dry firing. That's okay. I've had that happen
right.
before on a show where someone was practicing dry firing, and at the end of it, I said, "What was that noise?" And they're like, I was dry firing. Was that bad?" I'm like, "Nah, don't worry about it. It's just gonna muffle most of what you were saying." But all right, so you're shooting a Glock. You're doing a lot of dry fire. Uh, you were shooting USPSA.
Mhm.
How long did it take for you to make GM?
It took a while. I think I progressed after I really. became a member, I've been every level of classification that there is. So unclassified, D, C, B, and on up. I think I was a D class the longest, right? I mean, you're unclassified for just a very short period of time. I think it was like one season that I was a U after I got my membership. Then I think I was a D class for like 2 years, and then after that, it was every year I had a progression up. And you know, part of the thing that I think is really, I don't want to say it. Part of the thing that I think is really nice about a classification system, in USPSA, IDPA, whatever, is the fact that it's kind of like a bit of the reason to keep practicing, the reason to get better, right? And I mean, we can bemoan the fact that somebody increased the hit factors by 5% and or decreased them, or some classifiers are shot out or not, or whatever. But I think it's one of those things where it's still possible, and it's still something that people, when they put forth the effort, then they do see that growth. It can be the carrot at the end of at the end of the stick, right? Like dangling in front of you to kind of move yourself forward and progress. And that essentially that's what it was. It's like, okay, I start to understand the classification system. Okay, now I need to like really start practicing and trying to hone those skills that are going to show up on the classifier. And it's funny, the better you get at doing those skills that are on most of those classifiers, the more serious you kind of get about the sport in general. So if you're learning the skills that you know make you a good master class or GM class shooter, right? Draws, reloads, and the ability to like put it all together, split and transition, do all that stuff, and then you go to a match and you run to the first position, you see 3 or 4 targets, and you pop, 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 shoot them at a GM level pace, and then you run to the next position, and there's 3 or 4 more targets, and you pop, 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 shoot them at a GM level pace. Then you kind of just, you know, I mean, the two are pretty closely related. They correlate pretty well. Like if a GM on the classification system and you haven't cheated somehow to, which unfortunately there is a lot of allegations of cheating for people, which is, I think, just really sad. Why do you need to cheat at this sport? I mean, it's just kind of asinine. But if you're earnestly putting in that work to get a GM level classification or master level classification, then it does carry over to your performance. In droves, I would say. When you're running a field course, or I mean, people who are GMs finish at the top of the pack compared to the rest of the shooters. And yeah, maybe there's that one A class guy who's underclassified or whatever, or something like that, the JBLs of the world or something like that. But oh well, so for the most part, it kind of, it mirrors the expectation and reality pretty well. Right. So, um, I think that was one of those big things. So it's like, as you see yourself get better, you start to see yourself get more serious about the whole sport in general, and you start to put in that work and start to reap the reward a little bit. So you start winning matches, you start winning sectionals, area matches, and so on and so forth. So I think that's good. It's self-rewarding, right?
And then how did you start to make that side shooting of IDPA? What was the draw for IDPA? Did they have IDPA in Chicago, or is that something
Sure.
new when you came down to Florida?
No, 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 no. I've been shooting IDPA for a long time as well. So the club. So I used to run the McHenry Ipsic Shooting Society Miss. That's where Matt got his start, and that's where I got my start, right? And traditionally, we used to run from October until May. It got a little hot in Chicago to go shoot indoors without any ventilation. I mean, we we had a terrible range, right? The ventilation was terrible. We all had insanely elevated lead levels, and had to, it's probably for the best that we didn't shoot for a few months to let the lead levels kind of, subside a little bit. Um, but yeah, the IDPA club, however, they kept shooting in the summertime, and just one of those things where it's like, man, I wish I could go shooting, go to the range. And go shoot groups again or something like that. And hey, they're having an IDPA match. Well, I just happen to have all my gear. Can I jump on with you guys? And sure, So they were they were a wonderful group of people. They run the Mick IDPA, McHenry IDPA group. They had, IDPA back then had a very different feel than
Yes.
USPSA. Yeah,
Yes.
it's I mean, the scoring was actually probably closer to what USPSA was. I mean, you could outrun your Charlies and stuff like that if you were, or your down ones or something like that, because they were only half-second penalties. So if you shot fast enough, sometimes you could pull some USPSA bullshit out of your hat and win the IDPA match, and it was ooh, but once they changed that, I don't even know how long ago they changed that. 6 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever. But when they went to a whole second down, that really like caused a bigger like spread. People who were careless with their hits, the sport became much more difficult in that regard. But scoring wise, at least. But they were a great group of people. They had a little bit different of a take, but it's ultimately the motivation is the same. Find the targets, see the sights, whack the trigger, and try and put it as close to the center of the target as you need to. Avoid your penalties and avoid your mistakes. And it was it was just a really good exercise. I thought it was interesting. A lot of USPSA shooters or a lot of IDPA shooters, if they stay in one sport, when they transition back to the other sport, they find it difficult mentally speaking. And I think maintaining that mental flexibility is the biggest thing. That I mean, from a training or practical aspect of firearms handling and manipulation and all this stuff, that is one of the best things you can do, is just keep an open mind and keep a flexible mental approach to whatever the task at hand is, right? If you're a cop and you're using training to further that, or if you're a civilian and you actually are worried about defending yourself on the street, or whatever, right? Going to a match and being forced to solve a problem, and having two different rule sets and juggling all that stuff, man, that is some interesting cognitive load that you put on yourself to to balance all that out, or to juggle all that. And it's fun. It's a lot of fun shifting between the two. So um, I still really enjoy that. I mean, we shoot USPSA on Monday nights for the most part over here in Sarasota, and I just came off a match in Miami over the weekend, which is really good, big IDPA match. And um, the ability to kind of walk both lines and both through both worlds, I think is a good skill to have. I think it's a good mental flexibility. Um, it's kind of interesting, right? Like Eric Graffel was here. I'm sure this may or may not be a question, further, but it's just interesting to see how he trains. And a lot of his training was really oriented not towards consistent repeat performance of a singular task, but really like, hey, let's spread this out and create like a lot of mental confusion and difficult conditions for you to be able to process through and maintain your ability to perform the task at hand, right? Whether it's the draw, the splits, the transition, the reloads, whatever. And you're going to judge the performance on the whole. And I think that's a neat way to kind of put it together for people who maybe don't have access to a range. If you've got access to a USPSA match and an IDPA match, invest yourself in both. It might be an interesting mental exercise. Um, it may bring you further along in the other sport just because you didn't expect it, right? So,
And
yeah,
for the people who don't know, so USPSA it's more, I would say, sporty compared to IDPA, or at least it used to be. It's been a long time since I shot IDPA.
sure,
IDPA, which is International Defensive Pistol Association. The
sure,
defensive part is the stressed part there, where you have more scenarios that are based off of like possible a crime in progress, or you're defending your life for this, or you're dealing with more rules. Again, I haven't shot it. You had to shoot things in
sure.
tactical priority. I know, like, if I shoot it again, I'll talk to you because I'll need to catch up on all these rules about reloads. I remember there was a whole big thing back when they were changing the reloads about when you had to do tactical reload, or you know, in USPSA, it's all gamer.
Yeah.
You are, I call it pure American, because you are trying to find, if you can find anything that's going to give you a little bit of advantage, crossing the line here, shooting something certain way there, you're going to do it. And then it might not be on what the stage designer planned, but guess what? You found that little loophole and you're going to take advantage of it. And that's the American way. Uh,
Right. America. America. Yeah.
yes. Uh, so do you find that you prefer one over the other?
No. I mean, the task at hand is still finding the targets that you need to find and shooting the targets that you need to shoot, and whatever your sequencing is. Um, I mean, basically, you're trying to solve the problem as quickly as you can in both sports, and that's really all there is to it. You can accept more slop in some of your marksmanship, I would say, in USPSA, and still get away with it pretty well because you're just not dinged that hard, right? On a high hit factor stage, right? Hit factor is 8 or something. If you throw a Charlie, who cares, right? Like, keep trucking because time is really of the essence. But an IDPA where everything is really fixed at a 1 hit factor, that doesn't cut it, right? You need to be printing all the alphas all the time, no matter what. And the shooting, in essence, becomes very deliberate. Um, but I mean, if you're racing somebody like Gorka, right? Gorka Ibanez, right? He runs the range in Volusia. Wonderful dude, hell of a shooter, hell of a USPSA shooter, hell of an IDPA shooter. If you're trying to compare your results to him, even though you may be in separate divisions and you're both getting plaques or whatever at the end of the day, that's cool, right? That's who I want to compare myself to. So can I do it in his time, or can I do it with the same hits or whatever, and become very close to that? That would be really cool, right? Where you're measuring your percentage off of that. Um, so there, at the end of the day, the motivations of both sports are similar. The practical aspects of some of them are a little bit different, right? I would agree USPSA is far more unconstrained. IDPA is definitely more constrained, but sometimes that's a good thing, right? Like it changes that flavor a little bit, and it it makes some of the tasks memorable, if you will, right? It makes some of the stages memorable, and you know I think that's part of the interesting thing about IDPA is that you can pack a whole bunch of shooting into a sub 18 round stage by enforcing certain constraints on what you can or what the competitor can and can't do. And I think that becomes really, really interesting. It's like, here in the days of, how do we score Virginia count, right? Like the NRI thing that just blew up like a couple of weeks ago, right? To whatever. I mean, IDPA kind of has like a lock on, hey, we're going to do it this way, and this is how we're going to do it, or you get a penalty. And okay, cool. So I like that about it. I like that sometimes that mental approach is a little bit different, and I think that makes somewhat of the USPSA competition a little bit easier too. If anything, it's helped my accuracy in the game, right? So, at least in USPSA, but
You are now shooting Berettas, correct?
I've been shooting Berettas for a long time. Yeah. Uh, so I used to shoot for Wilson Combat. I was a bit of the redheaded stepchild on the Wilson Combat team, because everybody was shooting their 1911s and their EDC X9s and everything like that. Awesome guns, which I don't have $3,000 for, but anyway, Bill Wilson loved his Berettas and convinced Beretta to do a big run of them. I shot those for forever and a day. Then Langdon makes just arguably one of the finest 92 series guns, and really love all the stuff that him and Amy do. So Langdon, LTT, Langdon Technology, like they're just been great. So anytime I need small parts or whatever, like I can always get a little priority bump from them, and find it in the mail a day later or something like that. So that's good. But yeah, I like the Beretta. It's been good. of course, there's a lot of other cool guns. The old CZs were great. If the steel was a bit soft, which is kind of a pain in the butt, but I appreciate the longevity of a Beretta a lot. It's just you can keep just pumping around through those guns and keep on going. So they're not as finicky as a CZ or a Tanfo or something like that. At least I found. So all right. So
And are you running red dots or are you still shooting irons?
I'm an irons guy. I tried running a red dot last year in the season, and I liked it a lot. But I don't feel like I'm done with irons. I feel like there's more to. I feel like there's more to explore with irons, and I want to keep doing irons. And the RDO guns are really nice. Um, it is the future in a way, but there's something about the simplicity of irons, especially like a good fixed iron sight where it's like you drop your gun, it's like, oh, I didn't smash the screen. Who cares? Keep going. Oh, the battery's not dead because there is no battery here. You know, um, yeah, you can knock them out of the dovetails and stuff like that and everything, but I don't know. I think there's just something simple and magical about like having a good set of irons. Like you rarely need to adjust them or do anything with them once they're on the gun. They're torqued down and like staked into their dovetail pretty well. Then I think that's good. It just saves all that time and hassle and everything. Oh, I don't need to check torque screws and batteries and optic plates and is it moving or not or whatever. I can just go to the range and shoot and then be like, okay, I'm done, and then go home or load up and carry the gun for the rest of the day. And it's like great. So yeah, I like that. I'm going to stick with irons for a while, which is, it's weird. I started competing a lot after kind of hanging it up in production. I started shooting a lot of limited minor and shooting from an appendix holster and in USPSA just to kind of explore that. And now I feel like I'm coming full circle where I want to actually go full on into the limited thing and maybe get a 2011 and actually shoot 40 cal yet again and try that out because I think the real heat, at least for iron sights, is still in limited. Right? It's the production seems to be kind of dying a little bit unless they're going to go to 15 rounds. Who knows, right?
Well, I hope they do. I'm like you. I've been shooting the red dot now. I want to say since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
It's when my agency allowed it. So because I didn't want to have both sighting systems. So once I did that, then I switched over to carry optics. So everything would be repetitions on the training. Uh,
Sure.
but I missed irons. I really did. I think it's fun. Uh, I like the way it's. I spent so much time and investment for years with iron sights and figuring out which fiber worked for me and all that. And I just felt that the dot, it's it's too cool now. Like all the
Yeah.
cool kids want to have a dot, and it just makes me not want to have a dot because it's I think there's still great shooters out there, including Eric, who use I mean they go back and forth obviously, but
Anything,
he
right?
yeah I mean
Yeah.
he picks up anything and the gun's gonna start singing yeah and
Yeah.
I'm sure that was a fantastic class. I'm very jealous that you got to take a class with him.
Yeah. Got a lot of good notes out of it. So, I took like, I mean, it's a small notebook, but I mean, it needed to fit in the pocket while between runs and stuff like that. But yeah, I took a lot of notes on stuff, and I think other than Ben Barry, I think I was the only other iron shooter in the class. Everybody else was shooting either an open gun or carry optic gun, and I think so. He was here for two-day classes in Ruskin, and we were in the first class, the Monday or Sunday Monday class or whatever it was. Then they had the Tuesday Wednesday class before they shot the Pan American Extreme match over at Volusia. But I mean, I think we're the only two iron shooters in all of the 4 days that were actually there. So it was like Ben Barry and I kind of looked at each other like, oh, cool, let's compare some notes here and ask him some specific things and the downtime when he's setting up new drills or whatever. Hey, how would you do this? do you shoot with an eye closed or eye open, or what are you doing? And that sort of thing. Just write everything down as best as you can. Ben, you asked a question, but I'll keep writing. So it was that was neat. Yeah,
Well, so
but
someone who's shooting irons currently, what are
mhm.
what are you seeing when you're looking through? Are you getting a sharp front sight, or are you blurring it since you can
Yeah,
do both now?
yeah. So I think Ben Steger was the first guy who really talked a lot about like shooting with a target focus, where the whole sight picture is a little bit blurry. Maybe the target's in a little bit more focus, but the actual iron sights are blurred out. I tried that for a while. I can't do it. It was too confusing. I tend to shoot with like a harder front sight focus, and I think that's been it's paid off, um, in at least in the accuracy aspect. Um, I don't know. I think it's just simpler focusing on that front sight. So I think maybe closer than like 5 yards, like at 5 yards, I'll see the target and I'll see like the totality of the sight picture on that. So that would be more of a target focused. Um, if it's really close, like 3 yards, I mean, are we even aiming really realistically at that point? It's like a rough index and let it go. But really like at a 7 yard target, um, maybe it's blended a little bit, but past that, for any real skin in the game, it's a hard front sight focus for me. I do tend to close one eye, close my left eye, and really ensure that there's only one true sight picture that I'm seeing, right? So I just kind of do that naturally, the little squint. So
So you're squinting. You're not doing the taping of the lens or anything
no,
like that.
no, yeah, I mean, occluders help a lot. I think, you see guys like it, shoot lightweight and bullseye, or you see a lot of guys just put like a paster right on their glasses. But I've always tended to kind of just squint, and so it's always lined up fine. Um, so I don't know, that's just me. I think there's many paths to Rome, if you will, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, whatever works for the person, and if they're getting good results out of it, do we need to change it necessarily? Um, Maybe there is an ideal way to start people and then see where they diverge and encourage them to explore that rather than be dogmatic about like, how you should do it. But um, this is what I really did like about a red dot though, is you can't shoot while looking at the dot. I mean, if you're shooting 50-yard groups and you've got the dot turned down, or you're shooting a rifle, then you're looking maybe at the dot a little bit. You're you are much more aware of it than you would be as if you're running through like a field course, squirting bullets at targets or something like that. Then you're just picking up little like, the angry swarm of bees basically, approach to shooting. It's just like when the swarm of bees is in the middle of the target, whack the trigger and go. And that's what I really appreciated about shooting an RDO gun, was just the fact that with that optic, you're forced to look at the target, and there's a whole new world out there to explore, right? It's not constrained to lighting up these two little bumps, So um, that was fun. That's what made it so different. It was just you see so much more, but
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I don't feel like I'm done with the bumps yet. So you know,
Now, do you teach?
yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I had an opportunity to start teaching at WAFT, right up in Claremont, and Joe Farwell was there. We've got another friend of ours, Buck Lawler, who's up there. They have a pretty good like firearms program. They do a lot of like scenario based training as well. So it's a neat place. So I've been teaching a little bit up there. I'm actually going up there tomorrow to teach. Do like a couple of like 3 hour long sections on firearms training, and then Matt Olenchek and I basically have started our own class. So we're actually going to be doing a class for an IDPA group here at Lakeland on April 8th. We need to post that out there, but it'll be on our Instagrams pretty shortly. People can sign up and then and register for that. So we're exploring getting back into competitive training. There's a lot of people who do that in the area. I mean, JJ's in the area. Um, Tom Castro's in the area and everything, but I think there's a big enough pie to go around for a lot of people depending on what they want to learn. So I think both Matt and I are more interested in some of the coaching aspects of it too, rather than just, hey, let's see how many people we can pack in and go from there. So yeah, they said many roads to Rome, right? So,
Well, if
but
before we get to any questions, I just want to say if people want to reach out to you for these types of classes, what's the best way to do that?
yeah, Instagram. So my Instagram is less pepperoni. Pretty easy to remember. Just think of pizza. If you see a pizza on the less pepperoni thing, then you know that you're at the right place. The pepperoni pizza is my screen icon or avatar. The other guy is Matt Olenchak. That's super tactical. That's his handle on Instagram, and we'll have our links up there, and we'll probably do a site coming up here too. Um, we're trying to explore how much interest there is in all this stuff and go from there. So, but looking forward to it. I mean, Florida is a great place for guns.
It
There's
really
so
has
much
become that.
interest. It really is, right? And especially now we have so many people from New York and New Jersey moving down and clogging our roadways and everything. Separate problem. But these people with their newfound freedom, maybe instead of voting the wrong way or whatever or anything, without delving into politics, maybe they'll explore a little bit about what their Second Amendment can afford them, and if they're interested in that, then we're here to help. So I think that'll be a good thing. So yeah.
Well, if people have any questions, post them now. I do have a question from the internet that I want to get out there.
Oh wait.
Sure.
What about that Israeli guy who asked a
Yeah,
question?
that's the question. Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, good. It's like we got to do that guy first, right? Make sure it gets
Yes.
answered, right?
He's very big. They have a IDPA. It's I guess he's their division there in Israel, and he wanted to know if people want a gun for self defense uh, in his country, they have a hard time to get a license for a gun. So they can only get one gun, essentially, in Israel. Uh, but that's the same gun that they would have to also not only use to defend themselves, but to compete with.
Hmm.
So his wants to know what would be your recommendation to a citizen who wants to train for self defense and also have fun in IDPA competitions.
I mean, I don't think there's a wrong answer to something like, "Hey, go buy a Glock or a Sig 320 if you can." I mean, I think most manufacturers, whatever their going 9 millimeter gun is, I think that is perfectly adequate to fill both roles. Um, Unless you're shooting something which is such a specialized competition like bullseye, right? I mean, then it doesn't. I think the accuracy of one or another make may fall short or whatnot. I mean, it's a pretty stringent accuracy requirement for shooting like 50 yard, 50 meter, bullseye course or something. But if he's just shooting IDPA and self defense, man, I mean, just use the same gun for both. You can't go wrong with a Glock. Can't go wrong with a Beretta. Sig 226, awesome. Whatever fits your hand and whatever you feel like you're going to be able to shoot well, go do that, right? Go explore that.
And now I wonder if I don't know. I mean, like, so for me, I shoot the 320 and
Sure.
I compete with the 320 and it's my duty gun. But I also have, well, I used to, I mean, until I could afford to get more, I have the compact that I carry for my everyday carry. So, I mean, that is an option if you only buy one gun. I mean, the 320 essentially is one gun with many frames and slides and everything else you want to attach to it. So if you wanted to have a bigger slide for competition, but yet still wanted to conceal it, you could do that. I mean, that I
Sure.
guess I'm not trying to plug a 320, but that is a benefit for it. Some
I,
of
I
these newer
think
guns,
I think that's one of the reasons why they made it is because the subframe, and I guess it really boils down to what's the serialized part in Israel or whatever. But I think that's one of the reasons why they made it, and Beretta followed through with like their APX series or
the
whatnot.
APX,
I think
right?
Right. A lot of these guns have like a dedicated subframe that you slide like the frame around and then put whatever slide you want on top of, right? So that's a great answer right there. If it, assuming it works for him, right? Like,
If it works, yeah. I mean,
right.
with the Glock, I mean, I was gonna say too, like these new guns that are, uh, like the 320 carry or the Glock 45, where you're getting a compact slide, but you're getting a full size grip, so you're
Hmm.
getting the extra capacity. I mean, that you can run that. I mean, look, these greats like Vogel and Savigny, they won world championships with pretty much stock Glocks. So you can, whatever gun you get, you can do something with it, and just figure out a way to conceal it if that's how you're carrying.
Right.
If there's no other questions, I'm gonna probably cut this off, simply because we're past an hour. I kind of like to keep these an hour. I know, but believe it or not, we
Sure.
talked for an
Wow.
hour. Les, I'll definitely have you on again, simply because there's so much to delve into with your background and your shooting, and since you're here in Florida too. But I wanted to thank you for taking the time to come on the show and be a part of Firearms Nation.
Awesome. Yeah. This is awesome. It's a pleasure being here. And I'm sorry we didn't meet up when I was trucking through Miami area this past weekend and everything. But the next time at the next match, right? Right. So, well, cool.
Absolutely. And I want to thank everybody for coming on the live stream. And we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Be safe.